All right, so we are going through today the rate buy down strategies and seller paid rate buy down strategies, why they're so important in today's market. We're going to kind of explain them. There's some questions about them. Even some loan officers don't understand how they work. So we just want to take a deep dive into them and get some questions answered for you.
Sounds good.
So as the real estate market continues to balance out, as you know, the market's been kind of declining and kind of leveling out. Depends on where your market is. Some markets are still moving down. Some markets are actually starting to kind of flatten out, and we're starting to see multiple offers in other markets. So every market's going to be a little bit different, but for the most part, the markets are balancing out a little bit, and sellers are experiencing maybe some less offers from what they were 6 months ago, and maybe thinking about reducing their price. This is a great market for seller buy down strategies. There is a shelf life to this as the market shift, and as we all know, the market can shift pretty quickly. But for the most part, this still is a great strategy in today's market for buyers. So buyers that are using a mortgage, a price reduction does very little for their affordability. We're going to take a look at that in a little bit. That's why a seller paid rate buy down strategy could be the right strategy. Now, there's two types of those. There's actually a temporary and a permanent buy down strategy. So we're going to take a look at each one of those in some case studies, and then also just kind of walk through them and explain what they are. So temporary buy down. And that's the key word. It's temporary. So that means the rate that the client starts with is temporary for the first 2 years, maybe 3 years of their loan before it moves back up to the rate they would qualify with. So, for instance, if you had a client that qualifies at a 6.5% rate today, and we're doing a 3-2-1 buy down, then their first year, that rate would be down to 3.5%. And then 4.5% the second year, and then 5.5% the third year, and then the fourth year it goes back up to the qualifying rate. It can only be funded by the seller. The buyer cannot use their own funds in a temporary buy down situation. So it's only the seller funds that can be used. And you can only be used on conventional, government, and some jumbo loans. There's a couple of jumbo lenders out there that will allow a buy down. For the most part, they don't. But there are some that do allow it, and usually it's a 2-to-1 buy down only. I don't think I've ever seen a jumbo lender utilize a 3-2-1 buy down. It does not work with non-traditional lending, and typically what we would call the old days subprime. So non-QM lending or non-qualified mortgage lending, temporary buy downs are not usually something that you would see in their programs. Clients must qualify off the permanent rate or the start rate. So after the buy down expires, it reverts back to that rate. So they have to qualify at the higher rate. And it also creates the highest amount of upfront savings for the client. We're going to walk through some case studies and show that. But this is, if we have a client in today's market that is struggling with, maybe even mentally struggling with the high rates, this could be a great strategy to get them motivated moving forward now, to where we could get them a lower rate for the first few years of their loan and wait for rates to come down and then refinance them. And speaking of refinance, if the loan is refinanced before the temporary buy down expires, then the buyer can utilize the funds that the seller put into the escrow account to then utilize that to buy down the balance of their mortgage. So for instance, if there's $10,000 left over in that account when they refinance, if you have a $450,000 loan, they could then buy down their loan to $440,000, utilizing the funds that's in the escrow account. Even though the seller put those funds into the account, it's the buyer's money. So permanent buy downs. And again, permanent is the key word here. So this is not a temporary reduction of the interest rate. Instead, this is a permanently reduced rate. So we're going to permanently lower the rate right up front. Now, we utilize that in what we traditionally call points. So if someone pays a point, 2 points, 3 points, it can be funded by either the seller, the buyer, or a combination of the both. So if the seller buy down only gets to a certain rate and the buyer wants to get maybe a quarter point lower, they can bring some funds in and maybe get down to that quarter point. Clients can now qualify off the lower interest rate as it's permanent. So you don't have a higher rate that you're qualifying at, you're actually qualifying at the lower rate you're buying down to. This is a really good strategy in today's market where we have a client that maybe can't qualify at the higher rates or can't qualify for the type of house they want to buy at the higher rates. So for instance, if a rate is at 6.5% and the buyer now is looking at the market and going, well, I'm capped out at a $600,000 purchase price because of that rate, but we can get the rate down to 5.5% with a seller buy down. And now maybe that pushes their purchasing power up to 650 or 675. That puts them in a different category of home. And a lot of times that can make or break the difference for a client thinking about purchasing in today's market or thinking about waiting for rates to go down. Maybe they don't have to wait. So these are things that we can talk to a client up front about, maybe put some analysis together ahead of time and maybe get them off the fence. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So let's take a look at just the different buy down strategies. So permanent, temporary, 3-2-1, 3-2-1. So you can see if you have $1 million home, we're just going to use some round numbers here, $1 million purchase price, and the loan amount is $800,000, putting 20% down. And let's say the going interest rate is 7%. You can see where the payment would be at $59.47. In a permanent buy down situation, let's say we need 3% of the seller's money. That's typically what it would take to get down to a point lower. And this is a permanent buy down. In other words, the 6% rate would not be temporary through the life of the loan. It would be permanently purchasing that down. Now the payment drops down to $54.21, saving the client about $526 a month. So that's a good situation. The 2-to-1 buy down, where we would have a rate 2% lower than the start rate. So again, if the rate is 7% on a 2-to-1 buy down, the first year we have a 5% rate. The payment's $49.19 in that first 12 months, saving the client about $1,027 a month. It would actually take a little under 2.5% of a seller credit to maybe get that accomplished at this loan amount. We also have a 3-2-1 temporary buy down, again, temporary, and the start rate being a 3-2-1 buy down is 3% lower than the qualifying rate at 7%. So we start out the first year at 4%, second year go to 5%, third year would go to 6%, and then back up to 7%. And you can see that the payment would drop down to $4,445 roughly, saving the client about $1,500 a month off the 7% purchase. So this is a kind of a quick, easy graph to look at to determine kind of how each one of them works. So when's the best time to use a permanent versus a temporary buy down? So let's talk about temporary. So temporary buy down is a great time to use them if a client can qualify at a higher rate but wants upfront savings for the first 1, 2, or 3 years. It's a great strategy to utilize. So let's say a client can qualify at 7% or 6.5%, but really that's holding them back in this market. If we can negotiate with the seller an upfront buy down or get some money from the seller in a concession for that buy down, we can then start them out at a lower rate. That would get them motivated to get into the market. And again, the seller has to is the one that fully funds these temporary buy downs. The buyer cannot fund that escrow account, if you will. We're using conventional or government loans, including high balance loans. So those people who are in high balance counties, LA County, San Diego County, California, Orange County, the Bay Area, there's some counties on the East Coast as well, in Maryland and Virginia. If you're in a high balance county, you can utilize these temporary buy downs under conforming lending. Some jumbo loan products do allow for a temporary buy down. Again, it's a 2-to-1 only. So very few of them do. We do have, I think, a couple of lenders that will do that or investors that will do that. But there's very few of them that do that, but they can be done. The permanent buy down. If a client can't qualify at a higher rate, this is a great solution. So let's say a client finds a house for $800,000, putting 20% down, rates are at 6.5%. Their debt ratio is over what the allowable debt ratio would be. If we could negotiate a seller concession to get that rate down, maybe a half a point or a whole point, that may push them down below a ratio that does work and fit. So this is a great situation for somebody who can't qualify in the current rate environment. Seller can fund all or part of the buy down. So in a permanent buy down, again, we talked about this earlier, it can be all seller funded or it could be partially seller funded. We can use conventional government, which is be FHA, VA, jumbo lending, or non-QM or subprime lending, as we used to call it, also will allow for a permanent buy down. A lot of their programs will allow you to purchase the rate down for points. And the great thing about the permanent buy down is the buyer gets a discount point tax benefit. So normally when a buyer pays points on their loan, if they're paying out of pocket to get their rate down and paying their own points, at the next year, when they do their taxes, they'll get a tax benefit out. They can write the points off in their taxes. Now they should talk to their CPA and their tax advisor about that. But even if the seller funds it, if the seller is funding the buy down totally in total, the buyer can still utilize that write-off benefit, even though the seller paid for it. So great benefit for the buyer is, in the fact that they're using somebody else's money for a nice tax benefit at the end of the year. So that's a great thing to think about when we're talking to clients about this. So let's take a look at seller concessions to the down payment, because it depends on how much you're putting down and how these programs work. For instance, if a client's putting under 10% down, we'd want to use either the permanent or the 2-1 buy down. And the reason for that is because we can only get a 3% seller concession if the client's putting less money down. And so that's not enough money typically to get us to a 3-2-1 buy down scenario. So normally if a client's putting under 10% down, we would utilize either a permanent buy down or a 2-1 buy down. If they're putting 10% down up to 25% down, we can, Fannie and Freddie say you can get a 6% seller concession. So that gives us more money to work with. And then with those funds, we can then incorporate a 3-2-1 buy down if need be, or utilize the 2-1 or the permanent. So government, jumbo, and non-QM loans all have different allowable seller concessions. So let's take a look at that real quick. So you can see in this cheat sheet, the conventionals up top for primary, secondary purchases, less than 10% down, Fannie and Freddie allow you a 3% max seller concession. If it's 10 to 25%, you can get 6% seller concession. If it's more than 25%, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac allow you 9% seller concessions. So the more money you put down, the more money the seller is allowed to contribute. If it's an investment property, you're capped at 2%. For FHA, VA, and USDA, you can see it's a little bit different for each one of those. It's not as broken down as the conventional lending is. And jumbo, each investor is a little bit different. So we'd have to research each jumbo product to see what the seller concessions are for each one of those investors. We'll get you, if you need a copy of this cheat sheet, just reach out to me, email me, get a hold of me, and I'll get you a copy. I'll get you a flyer with this cheat sheet. It's a great thing to have when you're putting your offers together. So let's take a look at case studies. We're gonna take a look at a few different things here. Can you see the screen? Good, awesome. So let's take a look first off at a permanent seller buy down strategy. So this is something I wanted to take a look at because you can see if we had a $1.25 million purchase price and a client again is putting 20% down, and let's say the rate is 6.75%, we can see here's the payment on that. And again, here's the 20% down and here's the rate. Okay. So we're going to start with just that basis. And let's say that a client comes in and says, well, listen, I don't want to pay 1.25 million. I want to get my payment down a little bit. I'd rather offer 1.2 million. That is a typical conversation that clients have with their realtors is that's too much. I don't want to pay it. I'd want to get it a little bit, a little bit less purchase price because I want to save a little bit money on my payment. And if you did that, offered 1.2 million, then you'd have a little bit less in loan amount, as you can see here. Your rate would be the same, and your payment drops down a little bit saves you about $320 a month. So not a bad scenario. $320 a month is nothing to sneeze at, but there's a better way to take a look at this and a better way to advise our clients. What if we kept it at 1.25 million purchase price and didn't do a price reduction, but instead asked the seller for a concession? In this case, a $30,000 concession, not a $50,000 drop in price reduction. If we did that, again, we'd have a loan amount, same as what we would normally offer, but our rate could be a whole point less. And in that scenario, you can see the difference in payment is $650 per month, much better than the $320. So even though we're paying a higher purchase price, we have a higher loan amount, we have a permanent buy down in a lower rate and a much better payment savings. Now, that's a better scenario for the buyer, not only because of payment savings, but the other thing to think about too is that buyer is now purchasing at 1.25 million. That's keeping the property values up in the area. And now they're the next good comp. And so the next person that comes along is going to utilize that property and say, that property sold for 1.25 million. Let's sell ours for 1.3 million. So the buyer then keeps the property values up by utilizing the rate reduction strategy. Great thing for the seller, because instead of a $50,000 price reduction, they're only contributing $30,000. That puts $20,000 back into the seller's pocket. And by doing so, you're actually helping the buyer out, you're helping the seller out. The seller's recapturing a little bit more money. And when you think about commissions, that could be a third of the commissions they're paying out. So it's a better situation for everybody involved if we do a rate reduction as opposed to a price reduction. Well, let's say that we wanted to have the same payment here as the rate reduction and the price reduction. How much we would have to reduce the price of the property in order to get that same payment at the going rate of 6.75%? Well, we'd have to drop it down to 1.125 million. You can see how much that it costs the seller, $125,000. So this this rate reduction strategy is a great strategy and can be a good situation for all parties involved. And what it really takes is everybody working together as a team. And that means listing agents understanding how the rate reductions work, buyers agents understanding how they work, and then negotiating together and getting what's best for each one of their clients. So let's take a look at a 3-2-1 buy down. So we can see here in this scenario, we have an $800,000 purchase price, $640 loan amount, and a 6.25% interest rate. So if we did in year one with a 3-2-1 buy down, we get the interest rate down 3%. So we're starting at 3.25%. And you can see that's a $1,500 savings in the payment. Year two, we're up to 4.25%. Again, $792 per month in payment savings for year two. And then in year three, we're at 5.25%, a $406 per month savings. And then in year four, it goes back up to this, the 6.25%. And you're back to your normal payment. So you can see here that this is a great scenario for a client who wants to transition in the market. This is a good scenario right now for somebody putting more than 10% down. If we can negotiate that with the seller, that buys them time in this market so they don't have to pay the higher interest rates that are currently out there. We think by the middle of this year in 2023, rates are going to be trending towards 5%. I personally think that towards the end of the year and going into 2024, we'll be in the 4% range, or in the fours anyway. And there's a possibility if the economy slows down hard enough, which it could, we could get back under 4% again. So the point is that if we can utilize these strategies to help these clients transition through, we're going to have an opportunity down the line to help these clients refinance into a more permanent loan at a lower rate. So this is a great strategy right now to combat these higher rates. Let's take a look at a 2-1 buy down. So in this case, again, we have a $600,000 purchase price. We have a $480,000 loan amount, 6.25% rate. And you can see our payment here is $3,680 per month. So in year One, with the 2-1 buy down, we have a 4.25% rate, 2% lower than the start rate that they qualify at. Payment's $3,086. It's a $595 per month savings. In year 2, it goes up to 5.25%. We still have a $304 per month savings, and in year 3, it goes back to the normal rate. But before that happens, as we just talked about, we think rates are moving down. We're going to have an opportunity to refinance this client. What if we refinance them within 24 months and rates are at 4%? Well, they're going to start out probably by that time with a lower principal balance of $450 because they've paid their mortgage down a little bit. And if we can get them a 4% rate in the next 24 months, their payment actually drops down below $3,000 to $2,900 per month, saving them $780 from what their payment would be over here. So again, these strategies are great strategies to combat the high rates, to transition through this high rate environment that we're currently in. And as we know, since October, we've been talking about this on the webinar, since October, rates have been trending down and they're going to continue to trend down. So the trend is lower rates. That is going to happen. And so we have an opportunity here with these clients to utilize these strategies in order to help them. And this is a great situation for clients that are maybe on the fence a little bit, that we can actually put these strategies in front of them and maybe it gets them moving forward now. This is a great market right now for a client to be purchasing a house in. And why is that? Because there's less competition. There's the ability to negotiate with sellers. Prices aren't going to be moving further down. Once rates move down, demand is going to increase, and that's going to be supportive of home prices. And we've talked about in the past few weeks, we've shown you multiple charts. When a recession hits, and everybody thinks a recession's coming, it's pretty much baked into the cake at this point. When a recession hits, mortgage rates always go down during recessions, and home prices, with the exception of 2008, because our industry caused that particular recession, in every other recession, home prices rise through recessions. So rates go down, home prices rise, and as rates go down, we'll see more demand. We have an extremely low rate environment right now, inventory environment right now. So we're going to look at that in a minute. And so you know that as soon as rates move down, demand picks back up, the selling season starts. We are going to see multiple offers again, and maybe we may not have the opportunity to then utilize these strategies as well as we can right now. So it's a great market to talk to clients about. So let's get back to our strategies here, or our presentation here. Let's review some of these charts we've been going back through over the past couple of weeks. So as you can see, this one is the 30-year fixed rate mortgage and the consumer price index. As we've talked about, in general terms, typically, as inflation goes, so goes mortgage rates. Meaning, if inflation is moving up, rates move up. If inflation is moving down, rates move down. The only time that doesn't happen is when the Fed is utilizing quantitative easing and putting their thumb on the scale and keeping rates artificially low, which we saw in this period here from July 2020 all the way into, basically January of this year. And then the Fed took their thumb off the scale, and you can see how quickly rates moved back up and followed inflation up. Now we see inflation moving over right now. We've peaked in inflation. And we know, based on charts we've shown you in the past couple of weeks, we know where inflation is heading. We know the numbers that are dropping off from 12 months ago. We know kind of what's coming. We know that inflation is going to start to move down. And as inflation continues this downward path, mortgage rates, again, turning over, just like rates or inflation's turning over, will follow inflation down. So we're going to see lower rates ahead. And we think, rates in the mid-4s to 5.5% range by the end of this year. Affordability has been a topic of discussion for a lot of people recently, for good reason. As rates move up, and as quickly as they moved up, and as fast as home prices have appreciated in the last couple of years, almost 40% in 2 years, we have seen affordability take a hit, okay? But here's one thing I want you to understand. This is a chart going all the way back to 1990 about affordability from the National Association of Realtors and their affordability index. You can see that 100 being even, if it's below 100, it's not very affordable. The further you go above 100, it becomes very affordable. So you can see that we've taken a hit in affordability. We're down to 98.5%, and that's actually a number from 2022 in quarter two. So if you take a look in 2021, we were actually up to about 148 in affordability index right here. And now we're all the way down here. But where it's trending is back up again. So again, this number here is for quarter two of 2022. In quarter three, it moved up to 99.9%. So basically 100. We're flat right now as of quarter three. When the numbers come out for quarter four, with the rates moving down, we suspect that we might be at an index of about 105 to 110. So you can see we're moving back up. Wouldn't surprise me to see the index for affordability over the course of the next year move back up into the 120 to maybe 140 range. So affordability is getting better. The other thing to really understand about affordability is, and why it's going to get better, is right now we have cooling home prices. That's why I think it's going to continue to increase. We have rates moving a little bit lower. And then we also have wages increasing. That's one component that the media doesn't really talk about. They don't talk about wage increases. We've had pretty decent wage increases over the past year. In fact, we did a slide last week on affordability, and we talked about how ADP, the largest payroll company, actually shows last year was about a 9% wage increase. So wages are increasing. And as that happens, that helps affordability. Now, home prices, again, we talked about this. If competition heats back up, we may see home prices move back up again. But with rates moving down, that will help mitigate that affordability issue. And again, with wages moving up, affordability should move back up into the 120 to 140 range shortly. We talked about inventory in the past few weeks, and we looked at this slide before. So we can see in the peak where in the housing market crashed, totally different market. We had almost 4 million homes for sale. We have just under 1.3 million homes for sale currently. And as you can see, with affordability moving in a positive direction, and we have a tight inventory number, we're going to see homes appreciate again. But again, with wages moving up, that's going to help. So we're going to be back into a market moving forward that we may see multiple offers. Okay. We may see a more competitive market. Will we see a competitive market like we saw in 2020 and 21 and having to overpay for a home? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe so. But right now we have opportunities. We have low inventory. We have low demand right now because of the rates. And if we can talk to people about getting moving forward, this is, again, a great time for clients to purchase in this market. Okay. We know demand is going to start peaking again and moving up. And the reason is because we can just look at birth rates, and we can see the millennial generation. This is kind of where we're at today. The average person buys their first home at the age 33. And based on that, moving forward over the next few years, you can see we have a few years of high demand. So this narrative that we're going to be in a situation where we have housing prices fall, we have the market collapsing, we're in a bubble, it just doesn't make sense. Because in 2008, the reason the market collapsed is because we had almost 4 million homes for sale and we had declining demand. You can see that here in this chart. These were birth rates from 1973 when Roe v. Wade was passed all the way for the next 10 years. 33 years later, that equated to roughly 2006, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and we had demand diminishing for homes. So this is why the market crashed. Too many homes on the market for sale, almost 4 million. A lot less people looking to purchase homes. We had lower demand, lower household formations. Completely different market now. We have very low inventory. We have increasing demand. And then it could, kind of level out a little bit here. But look at the post-millennial or Gen Z generation. They're just as big as the millennial generation. And look how high that goes up. So when you look at birth rates and you forecast out 33 years from where these birth rates were, we're going to have demand. We're going to have household formations. So, that's going to be supportive of pricing. why a buy down is in their favor. Mortgage rates go down during recessions. Right now they're high. So as we get into recession, mortgage rates will trend down. These buy downs could still be utilized. And imagine if we had a start rate of 5.5%, did a 3-2-1, we'd have a start rate of 2.5%, right? Or in a 2-1, we'd have a start rate of 3.5%. So even as rates move down, we can utilize these buy down strategies to get clients into lower rates. So again, as we talked about this past few weeks, recessions are supportive of lower interest rates historically. Same thing. This is a chart on appreciation. We've looked at this before. Property, recessions are supportive of home prices. This is the information. This is the information we need to get out to clients. We have a lot of clients sitting on the sideline today because they don't have the right information. I ran across this article last night and I actually put this slide into the presentation this morning. And the reason I did that was because it was just a little bit shocking to me. This was out of the Hill, and it says 28. Here's some bullet points in this article. 28 million Americans plan to purchase a home in 2023, according to a survey released by NerdWallet, the personal finance company. But get this: 2/3 of Americans surveyed said they expect an imminent crash. 2/3. 66% of Americans think the housing market is going to crash. We've been talking about that for the last 4 weeks, why that's not the case. We just went through that, why that's not the case. We have such low inventory and increasing demand that's supportive of the market. For the last 10 years, we've been doing 30-year fixed rate mortgages. We're sitting on trillions of dollars in equity, the biggest equity position ever in the history of our country. The market's not crashing. But if you ask 2/3 of Americans, it's crashing. That's a problem. That's a problem that we need to solve. That's why we need to get this information out as realtors, as mortgage lenders. We need to educate our clients, and we're not doing a very good job of it. So if we want to have more business, we need to do a better job of presenting this information to our clients. And that's something that I can help with. So if you have clients who just don't understand the market, let's book a Zoom meeting with them. And even if it's just an informational meeting, an educational meeting, and it doesn't lead to any type of transaction, that's okay. We're getting information out. This is a long game. It should be a long game for us as professionals. We shouldn't be treating everybody as a short-term transaction. We need to be thinking in longer terms. And education of our clientele and our client base is going to be key to making sure that not only are we getting the right information and combating what the media is putting out there, but we're also setting ourselves up for success long-term, because it doesn't matter if a client's not going to buy right now. If we can get information to them right now, they may purchase in second quarter, third quarter, 2024. We're just stacking up potential transactions for the future. But we're also helping clients understand this is a great time for them to own a home. We talked, a couple of weeks ago about a chart where if a client bought a $315,000 home in 2012 and sat here for the last 7 years and listened to the media, they would have lost out on $222,000 in equity by not purchasing. So again, the media is not doing us any favors. We need to help in getting the right information out. Another thing that came out of this article is nearly 30 million Americans plan to buy a home in 2023. In all likelihood, just a small percentage of them will succeed. Only 6 million existing homes sold in 2021. 30 million people want to buy a home. Only 6 million did transactions in 2021. So we have an inventory problem. We don't have a demand problem. We have an inventory problem, and we have an information problem. So, we need to solve for that. 70% of Americans who had planned to buy a home in 2022 did not succeed. 70% of Americans who planned to buy a home in 2022 did not succeed. Some of them made offers that weren't accepted. Others shelved their plans because they couldn't find affordable homes. I suspect that a lot of them weren't getting the right information. A lot of them maybe could have purchased with a seller buy down strategy, but didn't because they didn't know about it. Maybe their realtor didn't know about it, or their lender didn't know about it. So again, we need to be able to solve these issues for these clients, and we need to be able to have conversations with them and figure out solutions for them, because clearly people want to buy homes. It's just that we're not doing a very good job helping them. So, I'm going to resolve to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to help my clients to get the right information. And if you need help with that, I'm here to help you. Another head scratcher, this is really a crazy thing out of this article. 61% of Americans told pollsters current mortgage rates are unprecedented, meaning they'd never seen them before. 61% of Americans thought that they've never seen a rate of over 7% before. That's crazy. I mean, those of us have been in the business a long time, or old enough to remember 18% mortgage rates in the early 80s. Again, it's an information problem, right? So we need to really get out there and provide education and provide information to our clients and let them know that, hey, this is actually kind of normal. I mean, if you look at the average 30-year fixed rate over the last 40 years, it's 7.75%. So we're kind of in a normal market. It's just that a lot of people don't know about that. They don't understand that we're in a normal market. So again, it's something that we can help with. It's something that we can do, and we should be leading the way on that. So the problem again today is a lot of misinformation out there from the media, and it leads to a market slowdown. So we probably could have been busier had we been able to combat a lot of this misinformation that's out there and really educate clients. We did a first-time homebuyer seminar last week, and that's something that we could take out to the market, to your clientele. If you guys want to set up a home buying seminar and put it on Zoom, I'll lead it. Or I can show you how to lead it. But if we can get this information out, the more information we get out to clients, to more clients, the better off we are. Buyers are trying to save money by lowballing offers to sellers. There's a better strategy. So instead of doing a price reduction, as we talked about earlier in this presentation, a price reduction is great, but a rate reduction is better. Even if it's a permanent reduction as opposed to a temporary, so we talked about the temporary 2-1, 3-2-1 buy downs, or a permanent buy down where they're permanently buying the rate down. If we could negotiate better with our sellers and for our buyers, we can actually create better solutions for everybody involved. As we talked about in the scenario earlier, if you have a $1.25 million purchase on a house, and the client comes in and offers 1.2 million, they're going to save about $325 a month, by doing the rate reduction or price reduction. But and that costs the seller $50,000 off their asking price, right? But if we use $30,000 of the seller funds, put $20,000 back into the seller's pocket, and only use $30,000 of their money, instead of doing a price reduction, do a rate reduction, get that rate down a whole point with that. Now we're saving $650 a month for the buyer. And we're purchasing the property at 1.25 million, keeping the property values up. So again, it's a much better scenario. So we just need to do better. I think we all need to do a little bit better job helping our sellers, helping our buyers understand the differences that are out there in the market, and maybe some different solutions and thinking outside of the box I didn't think about. Sellers are losing money with price reductions in this market. If you have a seller that is thinking about reducing their price, and if you're a listing agent and you have a listing and you're thinking about having that conversation, maybe there's a different conversation to have. Maybe instead of saying, hey, let's not reduce our price, let's offer a concession and maybe keep the price point where it is, but let's take $10,000 less or $20,000 less instead of knocking the price down $30,000 or $40,000. Do you have a price reduction mitigation strategy for your clients? So when you're going into a listing appointment, is that something you're talking about to the client? What if we have to lower the price? Well, what if we don't have to lower the price? What if we can do something else? Maybe instead of having a price reduction mitigation strategy, you have a different strategy for price maximization, a price supportive strategy or a price management strategy. Maybe you call it that instead of a price reduction mitigation strategy, but there's things that you can do such as putting in a buy down strategy into your listing appointment, saying, hey, if we get into a market and the property's sitting for a little bit, instead of doing traditionally what people want to do, and that's come to you and say, hey, lower your price, why don't we do this instead, or try this? You know, maybe there's a number of different things you probably could put into that strategy. And you guys are realtors, you know better than I do what that could be, but maybe talking about them about decluttering and staging the home to give them, you know, the maximum value. Maybe a renovation strategy around price maximization. So, you know, we have a program that if you have a property that needs to be updated a little bit, we can provide funds to update that property, and then you go and sell it. Okay. And it doesn't cost the buyer anything or the seller anything. So there's a lot of things that we can do. And if you want to talk about how to put that strategy together, I'd be happy to have that conversation. I don't have all the answers, but I'd love to brainstorm and talk about, you know, what you guys can do. So let's team up to help, I guess, is really my point. You know, so think about this. What buyers were you working with in last year that ended up not buying a home due to rates or inventory? So if you had a buyer who sat on the sideline and said, you know what, I'm just going to wait the market out. I think prices are going to crash. I think rates are going to go down, which I think they are too. But I don't want to purchase right now because rates are too high. I think I'm going to wait. Okay. Or maybe they're thinking there's not enough inventory. I think I'm going to wait. There's going to be more inventory coming to the market. I'm hearing that there's going to be flooded with inventory, and it's going to move back to a buyer's market, and I'm going to have all kinds of leverage. That may or may be true, but we don't know. So who have you had in the past year that's sitting on the sidelines? Let's have a conversation with them. Let's put together, and we're going to talk about this next week, but let's put together a pre-purchase call with them and talk about what's going on in the markets. Let's talk about strategies. With the pre-purchase call, we can present a lot of different things to the client that maybe will get them off the fence moving forward. What buyers are you currently working with that aren't getting offers accepted because they're lowballing? They want to come in and just offer the lowest price they can get, or they can't qualify for enough home. Maybe we can use that permanent buy down strategy to qualify them instead of actually saying, I can't qualify in this market. Maybe they can with a permanent buy down strategy. What homeowners have you talked to in the last year that expressed interest in moving but didn't end up doing anything? You know, there's a lot of homeowners out there that are sitting on extremely low rates, would love to move, but they feel like they're trapped because of the low rate. Well, maybe a 3-2-1 buy down strategy might be something that could help them get off the fence and move up into that next purchase or move down into that next purchase. If you think about the last 3 years and how fast home prices went up and how crazy the markets were, you probably can think of a few clients who just jumped on a property because they were afraid if they didn't, they weren't going to get anything, or maybe they lost out on a lot of properties and then finally settled on a property and maybe they're not in their best property. You know, my teammates and I, we've had conversations with clients recently when we've talked to them and just like, hey, how we call them up and say, how are things going? You know, tell us about what's going on. Maybe we're doing an annual review with them or whatever. On occasion, we get this conversation, you know, I'm not happy with my house. I've got this really cool low rate, but I don't like where I live. I don't like the school system. I don't like the neighborhood. The commute turned out to be just way too long for me. A lot of people purchase houses in areas that maybe they wouldn't have purchased in because they felt like they needed to get into the market in the last 3 years because the market was so insanely hot. You know, those are, if you dial through your database, especially people who bought over the last 3 years, that might be a good thing to do over the next 60 days is dial through your last 3 years of people who purchase homes and find out how they're doing. How do they like their house? Do they like their neighborhood? What's going on with them? You know, you might find a couple of transactions in there where people are saying, you know what, I really would like to sell this house and purchase something else. I'd rather be over here. Are you working with any sellers who are contemplating a price reduction? If you are, let's put together a seller buy down strategy and present it to them and put it in front of them. They can choose to use it or not, but I'd be happy to put that together for you and help you. So these are some of the things that we can do. I mean, love to team up to help you guys. Even if I'm not doing the transaction, that's perfectly fine. We're just here to come alongside of you and help you move your business forward, grow your business. And ultimately, if we're all working together, we're going to change the industry for the better because we're getting the right information out to clients. We're doing the right things for clients. We're showing them strategies that maybe they didn't know about and help them make an informed decision. Because right now, a lot of people are making decisions, but they're not making informed decisions. And what I mean by that is they're listening to the media, they're hearing things at work, they're talking to their relatives, they're getting all this input, and they're probably not getting the right information. So we need to be the ones to make sure that we're giving them the right information, but not only just telling them, we need to show them. And that's why I was telling you, if you need me to jump in, do a presentation for clients, we can put together something with a Zoom call or and show some of these charts. We can talk to them and show them historical and empirical data as to why we know this is where the market's going or why we know the market's strong. So again, happy to help. We're here for that. Last thing, next week, we're going to talk about motivating those clients to action. So I'm going to put something together to talk about how can we motivate these clients and how to expand your opportunities by motivating fence-sending clients to action in the current market. So if we could get in front of clients and talk to them, it may be a situation where they say, well, you know what, you're right. This is actually the right time for me to purchase. It may not. After talking to them, they may say, you know what, this is still not the right time for me. And I want to wait until this point. Perfectly fine, but at least they're making an informed decision, and that's okay. And we may be setting up a client for future success down the line. And so you have business you're already building, but we also may find clients that want to do something and do something now before the market starts to really pick up and competition really starts to pick up and we're back in 5 to 10 offer situations. So that's where we're at today. That's the end of the presentation. We're going to open it up. Anybody have any questions, anything?
Hey, Ken, it's Judy.
Hi, Judy.
Hey, so you were talking about, is there a table or something we can use, like in a listing presentation for sellers in general? When we're sitting with them, say, hey, here's what your house was worth, a year and a half ago. Now the market is, a lot more calm and so forth. And, but rather than reducing it this 20 or 30,000, here's what we can do. So, how much is that going to cost them? Is there some sort of table we can use for that?
There's not really like a general table. What I would say is the best thing to do is let's customize something for that client. So if you have a client, just get with me. My team and I can put something together for you. That way we're using actual numbers for the client that means something to the client. If we just use a general table, it may or may not resonate with the client because they may look at that and go, that doesn't really fit me. But if we can tailor it to their situation, then we can give you something you can take to the client and utilize. So the answer to that is yes, but yes, in a sense that we need to tailor it for each client. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so is that something we could say, here's the listing we have, and you can sort of look over it first and see, and then.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
if you have a listing coming up, or you need something if you're going into a listing presentation and you want to put something together, let's get together and talk about it. We can put something together that's going to fit your client, customized for your client, and so that we can show them in a listing presentation, the strategy that you want to put forward. So we can certainly talk about that. Be happy to do it. There's no cost to that. It's just something we do to help you.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mike, how are you doing?
All right. Hey, man, it's amazing. We'll be going into one, I think the end of February. So I will be contacting you. And how do I get Dana to see this presentation right here?
Great question. So we'll be sending out a recording tomorrow.
Okay.
So I've also got recordings. If anybody's missed a recording from the first, few weeks of this year, let me know. I'll be happy to get the recording out to you, but we do have recordings going out. It'll go out tomorrow on Thursday. So and when we do the presentations on Wednesday, every Thursday, we're going to send the recording out. And then on Friday, we're going to send out the invitation for the following week. So that's kind of the schedule. So
Okay.
you'll get that recording in your email. If you, for some reason, you don't get it or you don't see it, do one of two things: check your spam or junk folder to make sure it didn't pop into that, because sometimes
Right.
that happens. Otherwise, get with me, call me and let me know, and then I'll make sure I get it out to you.
All right. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. We will, we're going to wrap it up here. We're going to give you some time back. We have about 7 minutes left. So we're just going to give you 7 minutes back in your day. But if you have any questions, please reach out. We're here to help you. And thank you so much for the opportunity to help you guys. And we look forward to working with you this year. Talk to you soon.